To gain knowledge, we must learn, we must ask the right questions. And to get answers, we must act, not wait for answers to occur to us. Very good morning, everyone. On behalf of Federation for World Academics, I, Lakshita Kanpal, take the honor to extend a warm and hearty welcome to all our reputed speakers and prestigious guests. May I please invite the speakers of the first session on the stage? Honorable Suresh Prabhuji, who is also our chief guest of the day and India's proud Sherpa to G20 and G7 nations. Sir will arrive with us shortly. Dr. Irfan A. Rizvi, professor at IMI New Delhi and also VP at FWA. He will also join us shortly. Professor Simrit Kaur, principal SRCC New Delhi and BOG at FWA. We welcome you on the stage, ma'am. Professor V. Ramgopal Rao, Director, IIT Delhi, could unfortunately not join us today for the conference. Next, we have Sri Surendranath Tripathi, IAS, Director General at Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi. Sir is credited with revolutionizing the Panchayati Raj and Rural Development Department of Odisha. As Secretary IT, he digitized all government orders and other information of Government of Odisha and put them into public domain on the website. We welcome you, sir. Now, may I please request Professor Simrit Kaur to join us on the podium for her theme address.
Primarily, if today's topic largely delves upon the education policy and the role of the industry and academia towards taking education towards more sustainable growth path. Now, there are some very important words in this aspect. First is what is new about the education policy and why in the context for which primarily I was asked to be addressing the gathering was the industry-academia linkages. It's very important to understand that no university, and I'm going to speak more in terms of the higher education because that's where I'm otherwise also coming from, can do well without the support and collaboration of the industry. Any world-class institution must have three very important aspects, which we call the three verticals. One is the vertical of the talent, second is the vertical of resources, and the third, which I would like to put it as a governance structure. Within the first aspect, if we discuss talent, who all are there in an educational institution? You have your students, you have your faculty, you have your researchers. And each one of them must have a collaboration with the industry for a win-win systems to emerge. The second aspect which I'm talking about, the resources, could be both the financial resources, which most of the universities are constrained of, especially in an emerging economy like India. Along with this, the physical infrastructure is also not too good. And in the last 1 year, we realized how technology and teaching has merged, and many of the best institutions actually did not even have the technology with which to take forward the online teaching learning mechanisms. From where is the money going to come? We don't have that kind of a money. And when I'm saying we, I'm not representing my own institution. I'm in general talking about most of the colleges of higher education in a country, developing country like India. So the we is a generic representation for the educational institutions. So we do need the support of the industry over here. And then finally, even in the governance, I'm going to link what kind of a linkage we expect as heads of the institution of organizations. Allow me to come back to the first and the most crucial aspect, which is student in any particular educational institution. Large number of students are going to enter the job market. Very unfortunately, employability is at stake. They might be they're not job ready. We are not producing job-oriented students because I personally feel, and I was also listening to Ravi Shankarji, there are three important aspects on which we have to inculcate the characteristics in our student: your knowledge sets, your skill sets, and your mindsets. Knowledge set is what the book will teach you, and we do that. Theoretical knowledge, we can give it A+. But the moment it comes to skill set, practically zero in most of the organizations of educational institutions, especially if they are coming from tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 cities. So who's going to do that? The skill sets have to be in joint collaboration with the industry. When we saw with the advent of Industry 4, practically the best of the engineering and management schools also in India were not introducing courses required at the pace at which, let's say, the best of Harvard's and the Kellogg's and Northwestern universities were doing. They had floated hundreds of new courses catering to big data analytics, artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, but we were far too late. And also the number of courses that were being floated were much less. Primarily because if we are going to work in a silos from the industry, many of us would not even know what the industry requires. And when we have our placement sessions, we realize that the company had come to pick up 30 students, but because the skill sets were not matching what the industry wanted, they pick up only 2 and go away. So most of the training is actually happening while you are on the job. Now this is totally a wrong kind of a scenario. If you want the true human capital to become the capital for economic development of a nation, because education is the only parameter which will actually make you say, this is not the way my life is going to end. So what are we doing? Negligible. And I just don't mince my word and shy in saying none of the industrial organizations are even reaching the potential of collaborating with the educational institutions. Nowhere. You leave the top 4, FICCI might be doing, Deloitte might be doing, but these are only counted on numbers. Are the educational institutions reaching out to them? We are also not reaching out. So why is it that there is no merger taking place between a win-win symbiotic relationship? Either environments are not conducive or knowledge base is not enough for us to reach out to the other partner. When we again talk about the researcher, most of the researchers in best of the universities, if it's a primary data collection, we collect data of 500 questionnaires, and very proudly in our defense at the time of defending our doctoral thesis say, I collected data from 600, 100 were redundant, 500 fresh and clean data points. Industry is not looking for a 500 data point, it's a totally non-representative sample in today's environment where big data is the thing. Everybody is working on R, everybody is working on SAS, we are not even teaching all this. So why is it not possible that the industry should actually allow their data to be used by a doctoral student and give a collaborative research? You go to Barclays, look at the kind of data they're analyzing for the non-performing assets of their clients, or even Walmart, so to say, because when I purchase something from Walmart, they actually know what were my purchases in the past 5 years. And basis this, they can also predict what I'm going to do the next year or the next month. And I will not take much time on giving an example, which is a hair-raising example of Target identifying that this particular woman is pregnant even before she had told her own parents about her pregnancy. And they sent her a discount coupon. And when the discount coupon was in the hands of the father of the girl, he went to Target and he was so angry. He said, my daughter is unmarried and you are giving her a name-based discount coupon. What values are you trying to inculcate in our so-called culturally orthodox family? And it was a very embarrassing moment for Target to defend why they had sent a pregnancy purchase coupon to an unmarried girl. So after 14 days, as a good governance policy, Target called up the father and he says, sir, I hope things are settled in your house. I'm really embarrassed and this call is apologetic, just to pursue the same apology. And the father at that time said, no, sir, apologies are at my end because actually my daughter is conceiving. So how did Target, the headlines in New York City were, how does Target know that the girl is pregnant when she has herself not disclosed her pregnancy? It's totally buying pattern behavior. So we are analyzing data so crucially, so critically, but the doctoral researches that we are producing in our academic institutions are not even close to the level of prediction what big data is predicting today. And that is what digitalization is all about. Several of the concerns are Very, very concerning. We don't even have our own regulatory systems, don't know what is to be done. Forget about the universities, but we need to introduce courses. For example, if you're traveling in Uber and Ola, how do we know that the surge task taken from Mr. A is different from the surge charged from Mr. B? It could be a personalized pricing. Is it right or wrong? So these are the kind of courses that now need to be brought about at the college levels, at the higher education levels. Who's going to do it? It has to be with collaboration of the particular industry. And as I've already said, we are way too behind what kind of collaborations are required. I take it forward and talk about the faculty. Most of the faculty is not trained in the industry, yet we are training our graduates who are going to join the industry. So the gap is right at the faculty level. Why am I not being trained by the industry? Why is it that in the summer vacation, teachers are not forcefully required to do internships also in the industry to gather whatever we are teaching? It should be mandatory for every faculty to have industry training. Similarly, industry should also be coming. I'll just break for a couple of minutes, then start again.
Our honorable chief guest for the day, Suresh Prabhu ji, has arrived. We extend a very warm welcome to you, sir. I request Dr. Irfan A. Rizvi, professor at IMI New Delhi and VP at FWA, and also our honorable chief guest, Suresh Prabhu ji, to please join us on the stage. I invite Mr. Shiv Shankar Sharma, Secretary FWA, and Mr. Manoj Kachori, co-founder of Social Story, to please join us on the stage. And for the felicitation of our chief guest.
Everyone knows who is he. Behind the mask. I have the proud privilege of welcoming everyone that is present here today to this conclave. Honorable Shri Suresh Prabhuji, Professor Tripathi, or Mr. Tripathi, who is the director of IIPA, my friend and colleague Professor Simrit Kaur, fellow academicians, corporate colleagues, members of the press, and students. Namaskar and good morning. As the Vice President of FWA, I have the proud privilege of welcome you all to this 6th conclave of ours, which we have been doing all along many years, barring the last year where we were caught by the COVID pandemic and could not hold it in the format in which we normally do. On behalf of the Governing Council of FWA, I extend my warm welcome to our chief guest for the event, Shri Suresh Prabhu, Member of the Parliament. He has been a union minister for almost 12 years, handling varied portfolios like power, railways, commerce and industry, and civil aviation. Currently, he is India's lead and Sherpa to powerful international groupings of G20 in G7. So therefore, for many, many years, he keeps on contributing to India's vision and goals. Shri Prabhu is an erudite chartered accountant, is also a law graduate, and you would be very happy to know that he is currently pursuing his PhD studies on climate change from Freie University in Berlin. Shri Prabhu represents the typical profile that FWA attracts amongst its esteemed members. His achievements as a union minister while handling various portfolios at different times are far too many to be mentioned here. Yet, it may suffice to say that Mr. Prabhu is a leader in true spirit, who not only believes in transformation, but actually goes about bringing it with gusto to produce stupendous results, which he has consistently done in the past and continues to do so in the present. In these times, where it is quite a task to find an unblemished person in any walk of life, Shri Prabhu is known for his impeccable integrity, ethics, objectively humane approach in personal, professional, and political life, embodying an authentic statesman. My heartiest welcome to you, sir, to this conclave, as your presence here it reflects your commitment to the cause of taking India to the prominence that it deserves in times to come. One of our guests who was supposed to be on the dais, Professor Ram Gopal Rao, Director IIT Delhi, unfortunately has caught the virus, therefore he is not present here, and we wish on your behalf him a very fast recovery. I welcome you, sir, Professor Tripathi, being here, and he is an IAS officer, of course, heading a very, very critical institution in our country, which makes a lot of changes and talks about where the bureaucracy should be in times to come. Welcome aboard, sir. And I would be missing on my duties if I do not welcome my friend and colleague, Professor Simrit Kaur, a popular teacher of economics at Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, and a very productive researcher and consultant for many years. You have just been hearing her as to kind of insights she has about what is happening on the research front and other fronts. She's a very active member of our governing council, where she makes valuable contributions to our cause, and she's currently leading a very respectable Delhi University Constituent College, the Shri Ram College of Commerce. I'll welcome you, Samrit, over here. I would like to spend a little time, though all of you must be very familiar with what FWA stands for and who are we, but very quickly. FWA stands for bringing all minds together, whether the corporate world or the academic world, so that we can take Indian education to a much higher level than where it is. We are kind of governed by the thoughts of Swami Vivekananda, who talked about soulful minds. Vishwakavi Guru Rabindranath Tagore, who talked about free minds, and our former president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who talked about ignited minds. We, through our endeavors, try to mesh all these 3-4 things together so that we can create future citizens, current and future citizens of the country who can really achieve the vision that we see for our country. I personally feel India deserves to be amongst the top of the tops, because that's what has been our legacy for many, many years. And yes, somewhere we slipped out, and probably we are in the right direction. The conference theme today, so we are an advocacy group. We talk about what is happening, and we conducted many webinars, even during the pandemic when we had closed down, on the new education policy, I think, which is a very, very wonderful vision document as to where we would like to be, something which reflects, a very fresh idea, which I think we in the academia have been waiting for, but I think the proof of the pudding lies in eating it. So therefore, it's very, very critical how do we implement that policy. That is something which is the subject of discussion today. So the theme for the conclave this year is synergizing academia industry towards skilling and transforming India in the backdrop of NEP 2020, as well as the pandemic that took place. We'll be holding 2 thematic sessions today. The theme of academic session is operationalizing NEP, action steps for higher education, wherein several vice chancellors, heads of institutions, and promoters of various higher institutions would be giving their insight as to how are they going to take the entire NEP policy and vision measures and actualizing it on the ground. So, and everyone is very keenly looking forward to that. The second session, which is going to be more industry focused, as this is our format, wherein the CHROs, CEOs, and other senior executives will be pouring over as to what is the what you call new work order that is going to take place post-pandemic, because there is going to be talking about hybrid way of working. So what would be its impact on people and performance management in the industry, and what kind of changes do we need to bring about in the format of working? This illustrious group will be discussing. And there is a bonus session today also, which is on corporate social responsibility. We are again senior corporate executives will be pouring over. I know I've taken too much of a time, and once again, on behalf of everyone present here, we welcome you, sir. And with the hope that all of you who are present here in these difficult times with the social distancing, masking, and so on, that your time and effort that you have made in reaching out here in time is worth its while, and you go back having, drawing some meaningful conclusions of this discussion. Okay, so I think we'll give a clap to all of us who have been made it a point to present here. And may I, sir, now invite you to have your speech. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, friends. Thank you, Rizvi Saab, for giving a very conceptual clarity about what are we all here for. And I really appreciate all your great efforts, and I'm sure with such sincerity you're putting them in, so bound to succeed, and the outcome is inevitable. So I really congratulate you and wish you the best for that. Tripathi Saab has been my colleague in the government, and a very competent, able officer who has done great job. And I now just realized that he's now trying to do something even better in the Indian Institute of Public Administration, because I think we really all, particularly me, I need training into public administration more so that we can deliver better. So thank you for doing that job. And of course, Smruti Kaurji, who is heading a very important educational institution, which is probably one of the most prestigious ones. And I think very happy that we are all here, and I can see many distinguished friends who are present in this program. So good evening, good morning to all of you. This is a very rare event, particularly for me, because a little more than a year ago, I used to have 7-8 programs like this minimum every day, maybe sometimes even 10, 12. But now, in the last few months, particularly year, probably this is one of the few programs in person I'm attending. So it's like coming back to your old life. So I'm very happy about it. At the same time, sorry, my dear friend, photographer, that he was telling me to take it out. I said, then what is the purpose of wearing it? So I'm wearing it, so please don't mind. In any case, there's nothing that my face can reveal that others can, so I'm fine with that. It's a very important program. And I'm not saying as a cliche that every program is important, obviously, but this is critically very important, because there is so much of mismatch into one, our employment market, job market. On the other side, academics. On the third side, as a result of this, there is so much of discontentment among the youth of the country. Every youth obviously seeks a career opportunity. And as we all know that every person is different than the other. Very different than others. So sometimes when you take poll, you try to categorize various sections of society into some part. And they say this is a sample, so I will make a sample survey and come to the conclusion. It may be right in some areas, because maybe your interest can be generalized, your priorities can be generalized, but still behind all that there is an individual. And that individual is so different from one another that every individual seeks a different kind of career opportunity. Somebody is very happy doing nothing. There's nothing wrong. I mean, sometimes you must wonder, he seems to be a crazy person, he's not doing nothing. I would rather feel he has realized the ultimate, because he realizes doing nothing is the right thing to do. Because sometimes we are in the rat race, we are trying to follow somebody else because he is doing it, that's why I must do it. Not that I have any interest in doing it, but because Tripathi Sahib is doing it and people are acknowledging Tripathi Sahib, giving accolades, so I must also do the same thing. By doing this, sometimes you miss out on what you really want to do, but that's a different matter. So, every individual has a different priority, different interest. Unfortunately, over a long period of time, we have not acknowledged that fact. Like Tripathi Sahib, sorry for me saying this, but in the IS, the batches get promotion. Individuals don't get promotion, batches. Now 1968 batch will be promoted to additional secretary. 1974 batch is promoted to secretary, something like this. In that, a person as good as Mr. Tripathi will be equated with somebody else, only because he was his batchmate. That is the only qualification he has. But by not acknowledging the identity of an individual, you miss out on so many things. First, that person misses out, but society also loses. Because just imagine each person would have blossomed into his own potential, what a society it would be. It would be a contented society. Because you are doing something which you want to do, and not because you are doing something which your parents wanted you to do, or your neighbor wanted you to do, and you are doing it because your friend is doing it, but you are doing something which you want to do. And therefore I was saying, because of many reasons, let's not get into that today, maybe on some other time.
May I please request Professor Simrit Kaur, Principal SRCC New Delhi and BOG at FWA to please continue with her theme address.
आपकी इजाज़त से मैं इधर आकर के बोलना चाहूँगी बिकॉज इंडियन कल्चर एंड इवन अदरवाइज द चीफ गेस्ट हैज सेट द पेस एंड आई मस्ट फॉलो सो रेस्ट ऑफ माई इंटरेक्शन विद यू विल बी फ्रॉम दिस पर्टिकुलर प्लेस. मज़े की बात तो ये है कि मुझे शुरू में इतना मज़ा नहीं आ रहा था बोलने में, जब अब आएगा, क्योंकि नाउ आई नो आई एम स्पीकिंग विद द हुज ऑफ हुज हू. आप लोग तो अपने दायरे के अंदर इतने बड़े स्पेशलाइजेशन के अवार्ड्स ले चुके हैं, और आप लोगों के साथ अपना कुछ भी वर्ड्स ऑफ विजडम या वॉट एवर इज़ माई ओन एक्सपीरियंस शेयरिंग इज़ माई प्रिविलेज. So thank you once again to FWA for giving this opportunity to me to interact with the elite people of the education industry. Going forward, मैं फिर से यही कहना चाहूँगी, I was talking about 3 sets, skill sets, knowledge sets and your mindsets. जिस तरह से mindsets pandemic के time पे टूटे थे, I know how we handled 3,000 students at our own college, and every head of the institution was doing the same at every place. Placements had gone for several of the students. Higher education, many of our own students joined Harvards, Oxfords, where not do they go. But because of the pandemic, air flights were cancelled, admissions were postponed, and their mindsets were certainly turbulent, and we had to handle them. न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी भी जब तक होलिस्टिक डेवलपमेंट आपके माइंडसेट्स को बीच में इनकॉर्पोरेट नहीं करेगी बहुत एग्रेसिवली हो करके, वो कहीं ना कहीं एक गैप हमेशा रह जाएगा. एंड इफ़ आई टॉक अबाउट दिस पॉलिसी, समथिंग विच इज़ देयर फॉर द स्टूडेंट्स इज़ योर मल्टी एग्जिट्स. So a student could go after 1 year with a certificate program, 2 year with a diploma program, 3 year with a degree in discipline, and 4 year with a degree in discipline with research. But the question again comes, a student who's going to go away after 1 year of certificate program would again be trying to find an opportunity in the industry. So the industry has to tell them what is the differentiating feature in the same discipline but with 1 year versus second year and 2 years. तो वो कौन आपको बताएगा? The industry people have to come to the colleges and tell the kind of required skills that they want. हम लोग management schools में बहुत often पढ़ाते हैं that you need a labor and a fan is to be produced, an MBA can produce it and a class 12th pass out can also produce it. Whom would you hire? Now you cannot answer this question unless you also know what is the productivity of both the people and the commensurate wages or the salary that you have to give. Assuming an MBA is 3 times more productive, वो 1 घंटे में 3 fan निकालेगा and a class 12th will turn out, let's say, a 1 fan. But that doesn't mean you hire an MBA. Because the remaining part of the data which is missing is what are the rates we are paying to the MBA and the class 12th. Supposing an MBA is 5 times more expensive than the class 12th, but the production of the fan is the same, automatically you will end up hiring more of the class 12th people rather than an MBA. But if an MBA is only 2.5 times more expensive than a class 12th, then your hiring would be for an MBA. So in the market, when there are going to be gradients of exits, we would need to know what is the wage structure or the salary structure, which is the compensation package, which will then determine who goes where and who will be in the demand. Another very good thing about the new education policy is the ABC, which is the Academic Bank of the Credit. So a student who wants to pursue a program outside of his own college, because the subject is not offered there, could actually end up pursuing music from International University or another university in Delhi or anywhere else in India. And it could be also through digitalization mode, it could be offline or online. So you have given the choice. आज की तारीख में ये choice है ही नहीं. हमारे यहाँ SRCC में commerce and economics people will be coming. Anybody who wants to pursue music as a passion, it has to be as a hobby. It is not going to be taught. And even if the person gets a certificate, it's not going to be added to your credit bank. So this flexibility, respecting where the student's own inclination is, it is going to take this into account. So these are some of the very positive manners in which we are going. And another important thing which has been introduced in the education policy is about the structural change in the hierarchy of the organizations. Under the solid umbrella, we have 4 verticals, each looking at different aspects, one totally for funding, one totally for accreditation, one totally for the level of the education that needs to be imparted, and so on. And this is good because under the present system, you had UGC pursuing all the 4 features. And there were overlaps and ambiguities, and we did not know whom to refer to. And research, very unfortunately, is a dismal 0 in the entire nation practically. Most of the patents and the wonderful research is not coming from Indian educational institutions. And it is not necessary that it is only lack of funding. सोशल साइंसेज में पैसा ज़्यादा नहीं चाहिए होता आपको अपनी डॉक्टरल रिसर्च करने के लिए, साइंसेज में लैब्स चाहिए. बट इवन इन द ह्यूमैनिटीज़ एंड सोशल साइंसेज वी आर नॉट प्रोड्यूसिंग रिसर्च because the teachers today don't even know what is the value of research. And again, please understand, I'm talking about a generic statement, largely taking into account the lower tier educational institutions in the cities. They don't even know, they think our job is only for teaching. Under the current scenario, if you try to have 2 kinds of universities, teaching with research, the second is research with teaching. This clearly demarcates what is the role of a particular educational institution. Is it going to be more of teaching oriented or is it going to be more of research oriented? And I'll wind up with just 2 examples which I would like to share, which I often also quote from management schools. There's a pike syndrome we talk about. Pike is a very fierce fish and it loves to sever the smaller fish. So the organizational behavior theorists and other scientists, they put the fish into a big tank, and in the big tank with another glass ceiling, and there's another, they put the smaller fish into it. And obviously being the pike, it wants to eat the smaller fish, but because there is there's a glass ceiling which cannot be seen, each time the pike is putting its head to eat the smaller fish, it gets hurt. And ultimately, the researchers and the scientists realized that after about 2 days or so, the pikefish was so disheartened that it sat at the corner of the tank. And once it sat at the corner of the tank, the scientists took out the glass ceiling. With the result, the small fish was all across. Now, despite the small fish being even on the head of the pike or even on the eyes of the pike did not budge. Because the pike had learned a lesson, I'm not going to get the smaller fish. And in the experiment, the pike dies. Now, if this kind of a scenario happens in a real life, where you assume that you've done your learning and there is nothing else to learn, whereas the scenario's economic environment has changed. The dynamic environment is always going to be changing, and the pace at which it is going to change is going to only accelerate in the future. Technological advancements have reduced the time period when you could actually sit back and relax that you know you adapted to a skill set. No. Skill sets are continuously going to be adapted, and teaching and learning has to be a lifelong process. And never ever think that you've joined the industry and that's the end of it, because even after joining the industry, once again, the rate at which our students are changing jobs is so fast. In order to be in this particular rat race, so to say, you have to continuously upgrade your own skill sets. And finally, the second example which I would like to close on would be, no matter how much skills and knowledge you gather, but if your mind is not at peace, and if you don't know your current values, never ever can the nation have a sustainable growth path. And in this, I would just urge my participants and all my esteemed colleagues who are award winners also to read up Professor Deshpande's case study, Harvard Business, it had come up, on the 9/11 Taj attack. Why is it that not a single employee of the Taj left the premises when the terrorists were attacking? They put their own life at stake, simply because they wanted to save the lives of the clients. So what was there in the leadership of the Tatas in terms of the hiring policy that ultimately some of them had to give up their lives to protect the lives for what they were meant to? If this is the kind of a culture and ethics that we can have, whether it is coming only from an educational institution or in collaboration with industry, academia, elders, whatever it may be, I think that is where the nation must head to, because those are the sustainable development growth paths, including your love for respect, society, climate. And I think with this, I would like to wind up my words with once again a special thanks to Shivji and everybody else at FDWA for organizing a very high level of deliberation, sir. I have enjoyed the deliberations put up by Suresh Prabhuji and the entire program. Thank you so much. Thank you. I look forward to now also hearing the views of Tripathi ji. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your information-filled and much interesting address. May I now invite Shri Surendranath Tripathi, IAS, Director General at Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi, to kindly come up for his address.
Good morning, friends. Respected Dr. Kaur, my respected political boss, Sri Prabhuji in absentia, the organizers of the event, ladies and gentlemen. Being a bureaucrat speaking after Sri Prabhu, you are on the bharose of Mahaprabhu only. Speaking after an experienced principal who manages the talent in Delhi, it becomes not a challenge, but an opportunity that you can explore your ignorance in front of knowledgeable people. As a bureaucrat, we are trained in implementing schemes. We are not supposed to think, because thinking job is done by the Prabhu and his team. Our job is to implement those thoughts, because we have been prepared by people like you sitting in front of me to be capable of doing anything if told, and do nothing if not told, and do something if nobody is watching you. That is in a nutshell the role of bureaucracy. I was referred to an IAS officer. I feel proud that I am an IAS officer. Out of 22 million bureaucrats, number of IAS is 6,000. How much they can tilt and change the policies
number could be. At times, numbers are not necessarily the right things. Same thing is true for politicians also. There are 6,275 MP and MLA throughout India. So these 11,000 people are blamed for sunset to sunrise, including in education policy also. Limited point of saying is that what we are aiming to solve through new education policy. Every policy you must have heard in your speech is that every policy has a purpose, every policy has an objective. What is the objective of this new policy? What was missing in the previous? We all became good citizens with the old policy also. Some of you are still, and when all of us are beneficiary of old policy only. A new policy is yet to be implemented. It will take 3 to 4 years to make it full stream. But what is new in this policy? What government is trying to address? Many more things are there in the NEP document itself, NEP 2020 document. At least a couple of pointers are there which government is trying to solve. There are 3 mega trends which are available for government as a policy challenge. Aging of population is one such challenge. Teachers will live longer, students will be less in near future. School will be these schools with 100 and below children is going to be much more in India very soon because of lower TFR and lower productivity and maybe population growth and other things. People are living longer, so aging of population has to be handled. Therefore, such education is necessary so that people can, even if they retire out of public or private life, they still remain productive wherever they are. Climate is changing. We require sustainable solutions for our current problems. We can't be consuming energy, we can't be consuming anything and everything. As Gandhiji used to say, all of you must be quoting that nature has enough for everybody's need, but much less for everybody's greed. So climate change is forcing government to have something which is sustainable. Why should everybody be graduate from LRCC? Even if everybody is equally competent, government cannot give them job. Neither the market. And I believe that Samaj, Sarkar or Bazaar, ये तीनों का combination is the answer for any policy. What Samaj needs, what Sarkar needs, and what Bazaar needs. Industry is a solution provider of either of the 3. Industry is a beneficiary, they are not a major player in this business. Because manufacturing is reducing. In fact, by 2050, those who will survive, they will see that there is a group of countries who will produce, rest will be only consumers. Even today we have seen, China is the factory of the world. India is the pharmacy of the world. Punjab is the granary of India, which used to be true only a decade back. Today Madhya Pradesh produces more wheat than Punjab. UP produces more milk than whole of Europe produces. We don't take credit of it. Limited point is that aging of population and the climate change are forcing government to think differently. One more thing is happening where government is not able to control, rising income inequality. Only a decade back we were told that 1 year of education gives you 1% additional salary. If you are 10 years educated and somebody is less educated by 10 years, his salary will be at least 10% less than that. Even today that is true up to 10 years of schooling. But remaining 10 years of schooling or remaining 6 years or 12 years of schooling or education is not going to give you that much of incremental income. More educated, less salary, less educated, more salary, and that has been enabled by people like Dr. Malhotra and others who are working on technology. Earlier, one worker was changing one manager. Then Taylor system and Bavarian system and all those things you must have been studied. How to manage more people with the same set of systems. We needed standardization. In fact, bureaucracy, we are trained to remove the anomaly so that it becomes so strict that it becomes like a mechanical handling of things. Bureaucrats cannot handle diversity. When there are 2 people to be selected, who is supposed to be given house, who is supposed to be given let's say, scholarship, we will commit mistake because when discussion is there, we look at who is nearer to me, who can pay me better, or what is the consequences for me. Mera kya hai? I'm not saying this is by design. Discretion are rarely used in the fairness of the things. I mean, all of us are parents, all of us are human beings. Do you use discretion based on economic or econometrics? Never. You use based on its eligibility and perhaps the requirement. Limited point of saying that the policy is supposed to handle these three growing trends of India, and therefore new education policy. What is new in this? I think many people will tell you, all the learned people of India are there. We are not a small country, we are a continent. The 32 million students are rarely in any country. That is more than the population of many countries and continent. We have got 40,000 colleges, which is the number of schools in many countries. We have got 1,000 universities, which is the number of, you can't imagine the size of the problem in India that we have. But how many patents we generate, how many research we generate, how many research that are worth execution where industry is required. I'm aware of very, very prominent institute, it's not any comment on them, Indian Institute of Science. 685 commercially viable patents, we wanted to sell them to the industry. I was Development Commissioner in Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise, only 5 years back. We gave the institution about a sum of rupees 5 crore, कि सर अगर technology है इसको दीजिए industry को वो बनाएगा. I mean, I cannot say that industrialists failed, but at least I as a government servant failed to make them commercial use. Because the professor was not interested in making it commercial because he has gone to somewhere else. The entrepreneur doesn't want to try on dead ideas because what is the purpose of this? Because entrepreneur does not take risk in commercializing a valuable idea. He will take the risk and an opportunity management only when the market demands. Even Sarkar demands, they will not do it. सरकार के डिमांड से सरकारी कर्मचारी चलते हैं, सरकारी इंस्टीट्यूशन चलती हैं. मार्केट डज नॉट फॉलो सरकार. समाज, सरकार, बाजार तीनों का जो इंटरप्ले है, that is what the education policy is going to address. It has been addressing since time immemorial. I have privilege of visiting Takshila in Pakistan and perhaps Nalanda in Bihar. We have seen what was our glorious past is. We wasted 400 years in learning English, as if without English you can do nothing. English, which was an skill, became a necessity bedrock of learning anything. And today's this FAGA, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and then all these companies, they will make it further simplified that if you don't know English, you are not a citizen of the globe. 400 years, if a country only learns one language, maybe some of them will become better English speaking, but that does not make them very more educated and more learned. This education policy is trying to address this also. There has been, as if you don't know English, you are illiterate, even if you know everything else. So emphasis on mother tongue is the major emphasis of this language. You go to Japan, you go to Germany, you go to Italy, people talk their own language and proudly. India may have, we say, sir, I may be excused, I will speak in Hindi. I may be excused, I will want to speak in Marathi or Punjabi or Sindhi or any other language. Language is just a skill like learning piano and learning tabla. This education policy is trying to give a mix of ancient wisdom and modern aspirational Indian thought process. If we are inculcating the Nachiketa's theory of search for truth in Kathopanishad, then we are also trying to take the ignited minds of Abdul Kalam Azad. If we are trying to answer the question of market, bazaar, that you can multiple entry, multiple exit, then we are also saying that you can be ready for the market. There is no need for everybody learning driving or everybody learning becoming Einstein of the world. Market cannot absorb if all of us are equally, even capable of it also. Then what is there the education policy will deserve and give us and deliver us after, let's say, 10 years, 20 years of it. The education policy must deliver on, make people capable. At least first thing according to me, that they should be ready for learning lifelong. Second, they should not look for government job alone. They should become entrepreneur. Even state is turning entrepreneurial. Diminishing role of state is a fact of life. In 1947, Indian government was doing everything for you. Even when you will marry, what is the age of marriage, what you will eat, what you will wear, where you will stand, which school you will study, whom you will marry. In fact, marriage certificate where you should buy the collectors. If you want to go to abroad, how much dollar you will carry, in which hotel you will stay. What you do inside the hotel, that was the only thing left for you. Where we have gone today? From total regulation, we have shifted to welfareism, roti, kapda aur makan, bijli, sadak, pani and broadband, so on and so forth. Today's state is turning entrepreneurial. We are no longer regulatory state of the 50s. We are no longer the socialist state of welfare. We are today emerging and converting ourselves as an entrepreneurial state. Only entrepreneurial state can create entrepreneurial society. If I as a state, if Prime Minister says that आप कुछ नहीं करो, मैं आपको तनख्वाह दूंगा, who will work? We are not idiots. And educated लोग तो idiot हो ही नहीं सकते. होते हैं, I mean, there are. पढ़े लिखे भी idiots होते हैं. The limited point is that the state wants to convert citizens into entrepreneurs. America, Japan, and Germany, if three countries are studied in its education policy and the social response and market requirement, you will find that the government job is 1% people look for government job, 99% become employer. In India, सबसे बड़ा लड़का पढ़ा है तो कहाँ जाएगा? वो सारे सिविल सर्विस में जाए, यूपीएससी ट्राई कर रहा है. उससे बड़ा हुआ तो डॉक्टर इंजीनियर बना तो भी वो इसी में जाएगा फिर से. And we are wasting talent in managing files. I am not saying that is a bad job. I myself enjoying it. I don't want to quarantine myself that none should contest me in my own field. But fact remains that government is opening itself for open outside wisdom. We were an open society with a closed mindset in the state and academia. Today we are reversing that. In fact, we want an open society, open academic and open industry format so that we can develop all around and 360 degree. You just heard Sri Prabhuji how society and many other institutions are responding. In fact, Rishi Hood and many other institutions which are here, you are responding to the market even before this NEP has come. I am a student of Allahabad University. In 1977, Allahabad University abolished the class culture. You are admitted in political science. Political science, there are 15 teachers. 15 teachers are taking BA1, let's say part 1 constitution portion. Any student can attend any class anywhere, no attendance taken. In the process, best teachers were attracting more students, and जो third grade teacher were getting humiliated by 2-3 बच्चे को पकड़ के बैठाए रहे हैं, गर्भवती जला के बैठे बेटा, तेरे को बाद में मैं चाय पिलाऊंगा. They were incentivized to attend those classes. Quality has its own cost. I am one of those who believe that some people say that knowledge is costly. Try ignorance, it will be costlier. Friends, new education policy, today we will deliberate throughout the day. I don't want to start with a negative mindset. Corona negative is good, but mindset negativity is not good. Wish you all the good luck and thank the organizer for giving me a chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And a big thanks once again for all the speakers of our first session. May I now request Mr. Shiv Shankar Sharma to please come up on the stage for the citation of the speakers of our first session. Shri Surendra Nath Tripathi, IAS, Director General at Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi. Professor Simrit Kaur, Principal SRCC, New Delhi and BOG at FWA. Dr. Irfan A. Rizvi, Professor at IMI, New Delhi and VP at FWA. Thank you so much, sir, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.